right, good morning, youth development advocates, and thank you for joining us for our 8th session of Java with James. As a reminder, we hold these sessions every third Thursday from 11:30 to 12:30. One quick announcement, we have 2 upcoming training opportunities. One moment, let me let some people into the room. The first training opportunity will be on August 25th, featuring Forefront Suicide Prevention, who will deliver a training to help prepare mentors and mentees as they transition back into in-person learning, and another training on August 31st on mentor and youth recruitment to discuss recruitment strategies and best practices. I will enter both of the registration links into the chat below. And without further delay, please welcome Mentor Washington's Executive Director, James Miles.
Greetings, everyone. Happy Thursday, August 19th, almost September. Hope you're doing well. Calling in from the unceded territories of the Coast Salish, particularly the Duwamish. And today's session is about compassion fatigue. And we have one of the dopest human beings on earth to facilitate this session with us. And that would be Lauren Mendoza. What's up, Lauren Mendoza? How are you?
Good morning, everyone. It's nice to be here. Thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
Great. So here's what we're gonna do. We'll do a little quick welcome, which we just did, introductions, defining and understanding, open space, and then wrap up. Go, Laura. And thanks for putting it to the chat, Vic.
Look at this picture of us. It's cute. This picture of us is cute.
All right.
Yeah, I was like, oh wow, look at this.
Someone not muted. All right. Icebreaker today. If you could meet any historical figure, who would it be and why? Please put your response into the chat. Who would you meet, Laura?
I have no idea. That's too much brain power for this second.
I'm gonna put Malcolm X. Actually, I'm gonna put Malcolm X and Betty Shabazz. I wanna meet both of them. Oh, Robin, Maya Angelou, Writing and Strength. I love that.
I didn't know we could cheat and do a second one, James.
Well, you know, I make the rules. They're the same El Haj Malik Shabazz and then Betty Shabazz. They're a family unit. That counts as one. Judy Garland. Yeah, Sarah. Judy Garland's a famous actor, I think. She was in The Wizard of Oz, if I'm correct. I think that's correct. Now, this may be showing something of my dissociation with history, but I've only seen The Wizard of Oz once, and I was a very young person, so I don't remember it. I'm an idiot. Alan Watts, definitely, Vic.
I think that most of the people on this, they probably saw the more updated Wizard of Oz than we did.
Oh. Not the Wiz. Which one are you talking about? The one that was like ABC on ABC?
Can't even remember.
Yeah.
But the Wiz was one of them, or might be the one I'm thinking of.
Yeah. Cool. We have some Buddha. Thank you, Stacy. During an event for a foundation, I was able to meet the living Buddha, which is pretty sweet. Well, walk past and wave. Let's be clear. Frida Kahlo, for sure. Oh, Eleanor Roosevelt and Yuri Kochiyama. I don't know who Yuri Kochiyama is. Civil rights activist. Thank you. Thank you, Elizabeth. Oh, yes, I know who that is now. On point, Ellie. That sounds about right, Sarah. Who's the Wizard of Oz? What's the Wizard of Oz? Please keep filling the chat, and then we will continue with this. Laura, I'm gonna turn it over to you.
Yeah. So a little just kind of like base vocabulary for our conversation today. First is compassion satisfaction, and we'll go into these in more detail for sure. But compassion satisfaction is ultimately the positive aspects that we get as working as helpers. And then on the flip side, compassion fatigue is the negative aspects that we have and see from working as helpers. Burnout is the inefficacy and feeling overwhelmed. And work-related traumatic stress. We have primary traumatic stress where we are direct targets of events, and secondary traumatic exposure, secondary traumatic stress, which is where we are exposed to events due to our relationships with the primary person. So those are just kind of some base vocabulary words that we'll be using a lot in this session. So why are we talking about this? And James, I'll kind of let you go into this a little bit.
Yeah, so there's the normal homeostasis, right? Which is regulating our body temperature, pH, hydration, basic body function. And allostasis helps regulate the body's responses to stress. When our allostatic load is too high, our body functions less effectively. And if our allostatic load is too high because of primary stress, secondary stress, burnout, compassion fatigue, you may have noticed, we've all have noticed that even doing menial chores around the house, cleaning our bathrooms, cooking, putting on clothes has become that much more difficult as we're, overloaded with stress. If we look at Bronfenbrenner's model of ecological theory, and our micro, which is ourselves, what's in our house, to our meso, which is our neighborhood, our community, to our macro, which is our locality, our city, our state, our government, our world, the amount of stress we are taking in on a daily basis is exorbitant. And it's up to us to understand how that's affecting our body and how we can try to rebalance those scales, because the body keeps score.
So this is ProQual's. So ProQual is the Professional Quality of Life. They have a website. They do fantastic things. They also have a little test that you can take to see kind of where you are in balance of compassion satisfaction and compassion fatigue. And we'll link that in later if you would like to use that as a resource later on after this. I highly recommend it. But the professional quality of life is made up of the amount of compassion satisfaction that you are seeing from your jobs and the amount of compassion fatigue that you're seeing from your jobs, and the balance of those two things. And then compassion fatigue is made up of the amount of burnout you have, and then secondary trauma. And those two things kind of go into making compassion fatigue a reality in our lives. And so ideally, we are seeing more compassion satisfaction from our daily tasks at our work, our interactions, then we are seeing compassion fatigue. But I think right now, especially after the craziness of the last 18 or so months, I'm a little bit off balance. Some of my friends that I've talked to in the field are off balance, and I think a lot of us are. So that's one of the other reasons that we're having this conversation, is we're about to go into school, we're about to have some more change, and things are getting a little bit crazier. And so taking the time to look at this and look inside and see, do some just housekeeping, and we're looking at where we are can help in the long term. And James, I'll let you do this one as well.
When experiencing overwhelm and trauma, you may be experiencing some or all of these within the circle. From grandiosity, I know I have the answer, I know what we can do, to addiction, whether that could be a variety of addictions, not necessarily narcotics. Hypervigilance, always serious. I was on a meeting recently where my good friend was like, why you seem so upset? And I didn't understand what she was talking about, but my face showed very hypervigilant and very serious expression, which if anyone knows me, I'm not that much of a serious person. So obviously I was being overwhelmed. Whether you're disheartened, dispirited, overly excited or underexcited, all these showcase themselves when we're experiencing trauma. Compassion satisfaction, compassion fatigue.
Is the positive aspects of helping that we see. And these are like the warm, fuzzy feelings. Some of us get our purpose from our work. I think when I first started learning about compassion fatigue and was engaged in a conversation about compassion satisfaction, one of the things that stood out to me was this beliefs about myself that I see from my work. I have an older brother who works in the oil industry in Houston. And when I'm having conversations with him about our work, it's really easy for me to kind of like set myself on the high horse and be like, I'm doing good things for people in my work, and you're ruining the environment. And so I think being honest about ourselves, about like when we have entered into service work, whether it's social services or whatever that looks like, sometimes that comes along with like this belief that we are good people because we're doing good things, and that our jobs and what we do on a daily basis kind of fuel that. And so that helps with our compassion satisfaction. It helps us feel good about what we're doing at work. So there's pride in what we do. It also might be related to providing care. So we're just happy that like other people are receiving the things that they need, which is an amazing thing. And that's one of the things that kind of keeps us in these roles. Our work with our colleagues can be really uplifting if we have great supportive colleagues. And then altruism as well just is this moral practice of concern for the happiness of others. So like other people are happy, which makes me happy. And all of these things can kind of help increase the amount of compassion satisfaction we are seeing from our work. On the other side, compassion fatigue, whereas these negative aspects, they can be related to some of the very same things. So when we're providing care to folks who are then doing really well, what does that look like when we're providing care to folks who are resistant to our help or are listening to us in the moment? We're having great conversations. They like come up with some suggestions for themselves for how they're going to approach a situation, and then they don't do those things. And then they come back to us with these negative consequences, and we need to do it all over again. So there are some negative aspects of providing care to people, especially when our pride is connected with the work that we do. If the system is a struggle, if we don't have the right resources that we need, if we're working with unhoused populations and just like seeing what renting looks like right now, that in itself can give us negative feelings about our work. Sometimes, whereas if we have wonderful, really supportive colleagues, if we don't have that, and some of our colleagues are always negative about the folks they're working with, or always kind of nagging, or whatever that looks like, they can also create some of these negative feelings. And then our beliefs about ourselves. So when my clients are really successful in doing, like, they're doing wonderfully, I'm like, yes, I'm doing a good job. That makes me feel good. But when it's not going well, I also bring in my own feelings for that, right? So if it's not going well, then I'm failing. I am not doing good at my job. And that those outcomes are not mine. Those are their individual outcomes, but I'm bringing those into my feelings about myself and my work. And then burnout and work-related trauma also impact our compassion fatigue.
Thank you. You could put into the chat if this rings true with a Y for yes or N for no as we go through this.
Yes, and I will definitely say, being the speaker in this, I am trying to not sugarcoat my own feelings for you all. So I'm being completely honest with how I see myself, and hopefully it kind of helps with just kind of having this conversation, because I think it's really easy to be defensive about our work and what we do and how we feel about our work. But in this conversation, it's so helpful if we are going to seriously look at compassion fatigue and burnout. How are our beliefs about ourselves and our work really contributing to that? So I appreciate you all going along with this with me. Burnout is work-related hopelessness and feeling like we're not being efficient and effective, which is a struggle sometimes. This can be related to not enough funds for the work that we're doing. We need to house 15 young ladies, and there's only enough funds for 10, which means that I have to tell 5 young ladies that they don't have a place to stay. Those sorts of things can really help kind of develop and lead to burnout. These are things that keep you from doing your job really well. It can even be like, we don't have enough. I think about teachers all the time, and they don't have enough resources at school, like paper, and they have to go out and buy that themselves sometimes. And the lack of support from supervisors can also really impact this as well. Also, a lot of times our organizations are underfunded, and the staff that we have, the amount of staff that we have is not the amount of staff that we need to be able to do all of our jobs really well. Because we're always working understaffed, there's a job and a half, 2 jobs, 2.5 jobs onto our plate. And when you combine that with this lack of funds for the folks that we're serving, the lack of resources for our clients and for the folks that we're working with, all of that combined just really kind of starts to wear on us and create some of this burnout. Secondary traumatic stress is just this work-related secondary exposure to extremely or traumatically stressful events. A lot of the young people and families that we work with, even our mentors, and potentially our coworkers, a lot of the times they come in with their own traumatic events. They share that with us. They share about the lack of support that they have at home, the abusive situations that they've been in the past. And when we, on a daily basis, are hearing these things, it creates our own traumatic stress response to hearing all of these traumatic events that the people that we care about and are working with are going through. And so both of these share negative affect. where your burnout is just being worn out. The secondary traumatic stress is about being afraid. And it's creating that fearful response in us. Go for it, James.
Yes. So what is burnout? Laura mentioned this. They found these lovely images from Lindsay Brahman on Instagram. Chronic psychosocial stress. Wow, that's a tongue twister. Affects the body and the brain. Slow depletion of mental and physical resources. Happens slowly, which makes us think we have changed instead of realizing we are sick. Oh, I definitely feel that. Symptoms: procrastination, chronic fatigue, cynicism. Yeah, right. Chronic lateness. I'm always on time. Pessimism, loss of imagination. There is no future. Reduced happy moments. Nothing works. It all sad. I'm trying to make light of this, but it's because I'm feeling pretty much all of these symptoms every single day, right? It could cause a crisis in a person's sense of professional competency. How many times have we had chats, Laura, about like, am I doing the right thing? Does this make sense?
All the time.
All of the time. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And it can destroy ambition, idealism, sense of worth, you name it. But let's not focus on the negatives. Stress is definitely a workplace issue, but it's everywhere. And here's some symptoms: isolation, emotional outbursts, ailments, them versus us. I think that's probably one of the biggest things we're seeing right now. Look at how we're talking about masks, vaccines, COVID restrictions, critical race theory, Afghanistan, Haiti. It's only them versus us. And I would put myself into sometimes in those categories. Like, no, they're idiots, without actually understanding the compassion, like the humanity of people that we're discussing. Ineffective, self-destructive, self-soothing, over-reliance on drinking, alcohol, video games, TV, isolation, sadness, apathy, you name it.
Yeah. So these are some of the compassion fatigue symptoms. They're a little bit different than our strictly burnout systems or symptoms. These can manifest itself as re-experiencing traumatic events, our own traumatic events that we bring to the table in our relationships. Avoidance and numbing of reminders. I know as time has gone on, I'm like scrolling through TikTok a little bit more, or Instagram, or whatever that is. And that kind of falls into that ineffective it's more ineffective self-soothing behavior. This persistent state of arousal as well, which can be hypervigilance. I know when I was working for the courts and just working with sexual assault cases and everything that went around that, when I would watch my nieces, it really I was hyper vigilant about where they were, who they were with, what was going on, who they were being left alone with. So when we're kind of experiencing compassion fatigue, we can bring hypervigilance to our own lives. This can look like sleep disturbances. I started having nightmares where I was going to my clients' funerals, and I realized this is not healthy to be having these nightmares on a weekly basis, being more irritable than we typically are. When I'm experiencing compassion fatigue, I am in a conversation with a client who brings up a topic or is resistant to something or starts blaming me for something. And when I'm not experiencing compassion fatigue, I can handle that situation really well. I can help them walk through it. When I am experiencing compassion fatigue, my response is less graceful. It's less understanding. It's a little harsher. And then this kind of like general sense of anxiety about what's going on. So these can be combined with the added impacts and effects of burnout. So sometimes it's really difficult to identify the two. One of the things that was shared with me is compassion fatigue. You are so preoccupied with the work and the clients and the situations that even when you take vacations, those don't help, because even in your off time, you're worried about these things. You're preoccupied with these things, which is kind of why when I was with my family, I was like really worried about my nieces. I was having these nightmares because I was super preoccupied with what's going on. Whereas with burnout, typically when you go on vacation or take a leave of absence, or even just on like weekends, you're able to kind of disengage from work and enjoy yourself. And if you're bringing work with you, that's really a sign of compassion fatigue as well. Are there any questions so far? I just want to make sure everybody, and I'm not able to see the chat, so I just wanted to, James, are there any questions or anything?
No questions from the chat just yet.
Okay.
But I think that's a great question. What connections did you make to the concepts of compassion fatigue, vicarious secondary trauma, and or burnout? Stacy writes, I was learning all this not long ago. I've learned some new tools and currently work with someone. It's so different to know, night and day. Agreed. You know, the first step is naming it and taming it, right? You can't really make a change unless you understand what's happening to your body.
Definitely. Okay, James, we can go back to the influences slide.
This one? Whoops. This one? Sorry.
Yes. Yeah. So they have found that some things influence compassion fatigue more than others. And for folks that are more predisposed to experiencing compassion fatigue, they found that they are extremely dedicated workers. So we put all that we have into our work. And when our work is working with others, that can really wear on us and be very tiring, even though it at the same time fills us with so much of the good things as well. We're results driven. So when I am at work, I'm all about what results are coming up. Are the youth that I'm working with doing better in school? Are they getting jobs? Are they keeping their jobs? Are they forming healthy relationships? When we are in jobs that work with others, their results become our results, which kind of leads into being other directed as well. Sometimes we have a lack of strong personal boundaries. I know this is something that I've really had to learn is after work, or when are the times that I'm okay being contacted about things? When are the times where I'm not okay being contacted about things? Being able to, if a problem has come to me and somebody else can handle it because I'm off, how do I redirect that to the person who is on working and can handle that? Unresolved past pain. A lot of times people get into social work or service related fields because we've experienced our own things and we want to help. And if we haven't completely resolved or started the process of resolving our past pain, we can bring that into our work and into our relationships. An overdeveloped sense of responsibility as well. This kind of goes into what I was saying about like, if my girls are if they're having and keeping jobs, if they're in good, healthy relationships, I am at the same time responsible for making sure that they are doing well. I'm responsible for making sure that like they eat, which is so ridiculous. I'm not responsible for if anybody else eats other than myself. But when we get into our work, sometimes we forget those things. An impulse to rescue anyone in need. And this can be from work to coworkers, to friends, to family. I'm a giver. I want to make sure the people around me are okay. And so that leads to me kind of like being on the lookout for anybody who might need anything, which is tiring to be looking at that all the time. And then poorly established and unavailable support networks. This is work and outside of work support networks. If we aren't being fulfilled and encouraged and surrounded by those that can help us and just be there for us, then we're handling all of these things on our own. So I moved from Dallas away from all of my friends and family to Salt Lake City a couple of years ago. And that was one of the things that was really a struggle for me, was I didn't have those support networks. I developed some friends at work, but other than that, it was my husband, and I couldn't rely on him for everything. So, and especially right now, as we haven't been able to see and connect with people in person for such a long time, a lot of our support networks are really suffering. James, do you want to go to the next one, since we already kind of covered those reflection questions? So now that we know all of these things, and I'm sure all of you are like me and looking at it yourselves and being like, okay, yes, I've said yes to like all of these things. Now what? What do we do now? Those influences, I connected like really deeply with those. So am I just like prone to be experiencing compassion fatigue for the rest of my life? Like that, do I need to make a job change? What needs to happen now that I know all of these things? And Gentry has done a lot of research on compassion fatigue. He has come up with some tools to increase our resiliency to compassion fatigue. And they do a lot of workshops and teaching on these different tools. And they found that learning them is significantly correlated with lessened compassion fatigue and greater job satisfaction, greater quality of life, and lessened anxiety. So we're going to briefly go into these things. I really encourage you, if this is something that you're like, yes, I really am struggling with this, or I have struggled with this in the past and know that it's a high possibility for me, there are some great tools out there that we'll kind of go into. But so we'll just go over these briefly. I am not an expert on these things, so I encourage you to reach out to somebody that is, if you would like some more information. So the first one is self-regulation, which is our ability to intentionally control the activity and lessen the energy of our autonomic nervous system while engaging in activities of daily living. So noticing when our sympathetic nervous system is activated, this is our fight, flight, freeze. When this is activated and when our sympathetic nervous system is more dominant, we are in this heightened state. So secondary traumatic stress leads us into this on a regular basis. And if this is our daily state at work, we get really tired. We get really tired, and we're not effective at our jobs. So self-regulation is really this consistent movement away from the overstimulation of the sympathetic nervous system towards the relaxed comfort of our parasympathetic nervous system, which is where we're relaxed, we're feeling good, we're not anticipating any threats. I know when I am experiencing compassion fatigue, what I am perceiving as a threat, though the amount of those things is super high. So it can be something like my boss asks to have a conversation with me, and in my head I'm like, I'm getting fired, I'm in trouble, this is a threat to like my safety and security at home. If I'm in a conversation with a client and they get really out loud and upset, not necessarily at me, but at a situation, or they're frustrated, I can perceive that as a threat. Whereas if my parasympathetic nervous system is really in control and I'm more relaxed, I don't perceive that as a threat. I perceive it as they're working through something. They are experiencing frustration. They are also seeing the lack of funding for, what their situation, and they're frustrated. So being able to really kind of, when we notice these threats, move from the sympathetic nervous system reaction, move from that fight or flight, and really kind of relax ourselves. When we perceive threats, I get really tension on edge. I start looking for ways to protect myself. This looks like me not fully listening to what the person is saying and waiting for a chance for me to respond. And if I'm being honest, those responses typically look like me defending myself or going on the attack. I clench my jaw. I have zero patience. I get some RBF. You can really tell when I'm perceiving something as a threat because my face shows it. So I think that's a good question for us to ask ourselves, is what are we perceiving as a threat? Outside of the situation, is it something that I should have perceived as a threat? Was I actually physically in harm's way? Or was it more that I was perceiving some things? Was my sympathetic nervous system activated? And a good way to control this is just to relax our muscles. It's really difficult for your sympathetic nervous system to be activated when our muscles are relaxed. So doing some muscle relaxation, breathing stuff is really helpful to switch over to our parasympathetic nervous system.
Is that possible to do while seated? Most of us are sitting in our laptop all day. What can we practice relaxing our muscles right now? What do you think? I know I was just listening, my shoulders were scrunched up, so I just had to put some intent behind just letting my arms hang down by my sides.
Yes, absolutely. And I know I will purposefully squinch my toes if I'm sitting and then relax them just to feel what that relaxation feels like. Same with my hands. If I can purposely relax, then it's really helpful for me. But it takes a lot of practice. I'm not necessarily good at it. This is probably one of the things that I struggle with the most, is letting, being relaxed in situations where I don't necessarily feel safe.
Yeah.
The next one is intentionality. And let's see. Sorry, give me 1 second. Intentionality is really composed of two things, being deliberate and having integrity. So the first one is moving from reactive to deliberateness. If somebody comes into my office and they just throw the door open and start yelling, am I going to just react to that situation, or do I have some deliberateness in how I handle that? Somebody told me
if I did that, if I threw the door open, Laura, where's my email I was asking for two seconds ago?
Yeah, it would take a lot for me to not be like, what the hell are you talking about? Get off my case. Same with at home, just having more deliberate responses to our situations and to, especially when other people come into our lives upset. And so when we move into allowing our parasympathetic nervous system to be more dominant at work, we're more capable of choosing how we respond. We are in charge of how we want to handle a situation. And going back and thinking about how we did handle something, and thinking about if we want to do it that way again, has been really powerful in my life. And I've been able to, if I handle a situation wrong with a client, be able to go back and be like, hey, I'm sorry, I did that wrong. That's not how I wanted to react to you, but I was just reacting to the situation. I'll do better in the future. This is how I would like to, how I want to respond to you. So yeah, just being able to move from being reactive in those situations to having some deliberateness in what we do. And then having integrity. So when work is centered in our, whether it's called a personal mission, our code, our purpose, our why. I've heard a lot of people call it like, what is your why? Why do you do this work? When our work is centered in that, our success and our worth is less defined by the evaluations of our bosses or our clients or our friends, our families, our coworkers, because we're not measuring like the successes or the specific outcomes at work, but we're measuring how we adhere to that purpose. And so the integrity piece of intentionality is really how true are we staying to our personal mission and principles? If we can go into a situation and say like, I handled that the way that aligns with my principles, then we're a lot more likely to, like, that situation is going to lead more towards compassion satisfaction than compassion fatigue. And so it's this intentionality of how we are approaching work in our interactions with others. I want to say this is the third one. Yes, the third one is perceptual maturation, which involves maturing both the principles of ourselves towards resiliency and the perceptions of our workplace to render them less toxic. So they talk a lot about perceived threat versus actual threat. And they saw this a lot with hospital workers, especially when a situation happened. Was it a perceived threat or was it an actual threat? Being able to sit back and ask yourself, like, am I in danger? If the client in front of me has a knife or something like that, like that's an actual threat. That's real danger. A lot of the threats that trigger my sympathetic nervous system to activate, those are perceived threats. Those are not actual threats. When I'm driving and an 18-wheeler comes over to my lane, that's an actual threat. And I find that the same reaction that I have towards that 18-wheeler coming into my lane, like right next to me, is when I'm experiencing high compassion fatigue. That's the same reaction that I feel when someone comes into my office and they're upset and yelling, whether it's at me or not. So being able to identify, like, are we in actual danger, or are we not? And then perceptions that help with this are kind of limiting our obsession with outcomes. And I've mentioned earlier, outcomes have been really important to me in my work. And that moving from less outcome oriented to the intentionality focused was really helpful in how I perceive work and myself. Relaxing our bodies, relinquishing entitlement. We are not entitled to anything because of our profession choice, other than like the opportunity to do our work and do it well, and like the connection that that has to our personal mission. That's all that we get when we go into this work. It doesn't entitle us to anything else. Knowing that we always have the final choice. So if, we can't have any more meetings that day, it's okay for me to say, I don't have room for another meeting this day. Can we schedule it for another time? Because if I fill my schedule so full, that by the end of the day, I am not calm. I'm not relaxed. I'm stressed. And so just like being able to tell ourselves and really act on our ability to have the final choice. And then the knowledge that work will always demand more than we can give it. There's always going to be more to accomplish. There's always going to be more people to work with. There's always going to be more. We're never going to live up to all of those expectations. So just do what we can. And that is as much as we can ask of ourselves. That's as much as work can ask of ourselves. So kind of reminding myself of these really has helped my work happiness and my life happiness. Connection and support. This one is really important, and moving away from home and from my friends and family and everybody that I ever knew reminded me of how important this is. Connection and support is feeling supported, heard, and cared about by colleagues. It's a crucial skill to maintain resiliency and to combat compassion fatigue. These connections allow us to share our narratives. When we are able to share our situations and how we handled something, it's a really effective treatment for secondary traumatic stress. And especially when we do that in a relaxed way, outside of our feelings of anxiety about it. So once we've kind of moved from our fight, flight, freeze response to kind of this more calm manner, being able to share that and talk about it with friends and colleagues that can listen and hear us, that helps us put those experiences behind us and kind of ameliorates the stressful effects. Our work is very isolating at times. A lot of folks don't understand what we do, don't understand the stress and trauma that our youth and families have experienced. It's hard for folks outside of this world to really understand. And that can be really isolating. But it's our job to intentionally build a community. That's our responsibility, is to develop and maintain the social network. And I think I am guilty of this, of just like feeling like that should just automatically be there, those connections and supports. But in all actuality, like, it's my job to develop those. It's my job to maintain them. And I'm not always great at that. So that's something that I struggle with still. But having those connections and support is really key in keeping us from having too much compassion fatigue kind of outweighing our compassion satisfaction. And then the next one is self-care and revitalization.
Yeah. Talk real quick about something.
Yeah, absolutely.
Connection. During I know we only have 10 minutes left, but during this time where we're all wearing masks, I realized after doing some research, there's a breakdown in terms of the Western paradigm and the Eastern paradigm, where a lot of connection and communication is found in the eyes. And parts of Asia, Japan, China, Korea, Where in the Western world, it's through the mouth, right? We see people smile, we see people are sad, it's through mouth expressions. And when we're wearing masks, we miss that connection, right? We miss that connection in the Western world because we're not seeing the person say something or how their mouth is responding to stimuli. Where in the Eastern world, it's more in the eyes. And so you can communicate and connect. You know, when you make eye contact, you boost oxytocin levels, which makes you happy. And in this time of looking at ourselves on the screen, we're not making much eye contact. And with that increases our cortisol levels, which is our stress levels, which contributes to more compassion fatigue and more burnout. I just wanted to add that in our final 9 minutes. Sorry.
Yeah, for sure. Thank you, James. So this is the last one, self-care and revitalization. Caring, and Audre Lorde said this, and I love it. Caring for myself is not self-indulgence, it is self-preservation. And that is an act of political warfare. And taking care of ourselves is key. We all know that we need a full bucket if we're going to pour into others. Being really intentional about what fills my bucket is something that I'm not always great at. And I know so many folks that I've talked to in this field, in this work, we're not good at it, but we got to be. So being a little bit more intentional, having a systematic discipline of refueling. Gentry really focuses on like, this is something that you should be doing all the time on a regular basis. You should have a plan and be kind of using that plan on a regular basis rather than when we feel burnt out or struggling, then going to our self-care. It should be something that we're doing all the time, no matter what. And then learning and regularly practicing that which sustains us, which takes some looking at ourselves, but we can do it.
Excellent. So as a reminder, if the demands of the job outweigh your resources to cope, so this is buttressing what Laura just said, then burnout is likely. Stress doesn't cause burnout, right? We have to have a little bit of stress, right? There's good stress and bad stress, but stress and inadequate support resources does cause burnout. So how do you make sure you have the resources to cope, as Laura just explained so eloquently, so that the demands of the job are maintained, while also, you know, you just said it, the work will be there tomorrow. You don't have to do everything today, right? We're not in a rush. Some needs are more important than others, but essentially the work will be there again tomorrow. Take time, take care of yourself. And this is a little, something I got from some of my colleagues is backwards planning. You know you have a deadline for a grant or for a meeting or for something, start at the end, plan backwards, make little tweaks, fire up your emotions in a positive way, like, you know, intent, monitor your mindset, activate your autonomy, right? I can do this. Identify your choice points, build that routine, make it easy, piggyback on behaviors, right? Be the mirror and the model. Make that commitment before you even do it to yourself. Gather your people. You know, my team is dope. Stop thinking, act, reward yourself, and soak in the satisfaction. Soak it all in. And then this cool survival guide from Trauma Stewardship Institute is a good final resource. Laura, you want to talk more about this? I love it.
Yeah, these are just some suggestions on what we can do to take care of ourselves. We'll share the slide deck. I really encourage you all to take a look at these if you haven't spent much time thinking about what kind of protects you and fills your bucket. But I also wanted to just open it up for questions or thoughts. Yeah.
I love this. Feel free to unmute. Thanks, Vic. Questions, thought, what will you take with you? What questions still remain? Gratitude. Thank you all so much. Thank you, Allie.
I know Mentor Washington, we do a lot of trainings and have a lot of conversations about our work and who we're serving and how we're serving. And so before school started and things ramped back up, we just wanted to have a conversation about you all and taking care of you all, because you're the reason that this work goes forward. And so we want to make sure that we're helping you all take care of yourselves as well.
Modeling self-care is something we can give youth that we work with. 100% agree.
Absolutely, Susanna.
Like the airplane, put the mask over yourself first before helping others. Normalizing this, giving us tools to healing, for sure. We are all experiencing this in some form on the spectrum. So it's an important conversation.
I just had a long conversation with a mother of two of my mentees this morning, who her last day at work is Friday, I think, because I think she runs she was doing the Vista thing or AmeriCorps, and because of the pandemic, they're ending. And just talking about that and trying to keep it afloat, and then talking about like all the stuff that's going on in the world right now, not just our country. It is interesting because, leading a mentor program, you have all of these issues that are affecting you and your mentors and your mentees and their families. It's kind of crazy.
Yeah, we can only hold so much, right? Definitely. Laura, Vic, final words as we say goodbye to everyone.
Just thank you all. I hope everybody at least had a little bit of a relaxing summer. So yeah, just we're here if you'll need anything, even if it's like a conversation about taking care of yourselves or anything. So we're here if you want to talk. Yeah, thank you all.
Yeah, thank you guys.
Thank you.
We're here to support y'all. So
thank you guys. You guys are awesome.
Oh, they're awesome. The team is awesome, but thank you.